How's it going, ladies and gents? My name is Jeff, aka Selmar PlayStation Network. This is going to be a different episode. It's going to be a review episode. As you can tell, Mafia 3 is being played in the background. I got the chance to rent it recently and try it out. Despite the reviews, I wanted to give it my own honest effort, much like I did with No Man's Sky. I didn't make a review episode on No Man's Sky just because, honestly, everything that everyone said about No Man's Sky was pretty much on point, and honestly, I felt kind of bored towards the end. Yeah, I don't know, I felt like I didn't contribute enough in the realm of like a review for No Man's Sky to really make one. But Mafia 3, not to say that I could offer a lot for Mafia 3, but I feel like I might give minor changes and minor differences in terms of my appeal to the game. But overall, I'm relatively along the same line as everyone else. I'm probably going to give it, as of right now, a soft 7, a high 6. So it's an okay, solid game, but it, compared to a lot of the other games that are coming out within the next month or that have come out in the last month or even 2 months, this is probably the most overhyped of the bunch and probably the one that under delivered the most of the bunch. Not to say it's bad, it's just compared to Rise of the Tomb Raider on PS4 and a bunch of these VR games, right? Like Res Infinite finally is coming out, on the PS4, and Gears of War 4 just came out, and a lot of other games. I mean, hell, Battlefield 1 just started having its reviews pop up, and it's getting really, really good reviews. Like, it's getting like an aggregated 85, 90 on Metacritic right now. So I think it's averaging really, really high. There hasn't really been any mixed or negative reviews from when I last saw. That could change. But I'm rambling, and I'm getting to the point that I want to talk about Mafia 3 because the Mafia franchise is a franchise I have enjoyed profusely throughout my life. I remember when I played Mafia 1, I remember the storyline to it and the setting and the characters were fantastic. I loved playing as Tommy, and his storyline going from being a taxi driver to becoming a mobster was just so intriguing. And on top of that, the characters you meet, the betrayals, and everything like that, everything was just solid, and it was fun, and it was interesting. The mechanics were okay. The world was, you know, like the Getaway, where it's pretty much just point A to point B with a world around it. But it seemed like there was a sandbox. There wasn't a sandbox. It was just you going point A to point B, and you could take deviations, but really, you don't really have any need to. There's no collectibles and no side missions. It's completely linear for the most part. It's just open-ended linear about how you really choose to drive and navigate for the most part. But to me, I still love the shit out of that game, right? And Mafia 2 was very much so a successor to that game. And I think Mafia 2, despite the shortcomings, with a very empty open world that was beautiful, that was awesome, but didn't have anything to do in it really, despite that nugget, I mean, I honestly look back at Mafia 2, I would give it a high 7, a low 8, honestly. Because the story, the characters, the world building, the mechanics, all of it was just solid. The gun mechanics in it were honestly pretty new at the, well, I shouldn't say new at the, really new at the time, but for the most part, they were relatively new, and they functioned really well, and it made sense that you didn't have this much ammunition, and the weapons you came across throughout the game were really cool and set piece, and the driving mechanics were pretty solid. I thought the driving was pretty good for the time, and the weather effects was cool. The change of the seasons was cool. Overall, the game, beyond the lack of side missions and side opportunities and really opening up the world, beyond that, I mean, the game was fucking great, honestly. And the way it tied into Mafia 1 was great. It really was. So, I'm setting this all up to what Mafia 3 is. With Mafia 3, number one, it's a reverse of roles for one thing. I've seen some people go, this isn't a Mafia game. This is not Mafia. And I would honestly have to disagree. A lot of people are saying this has nothing to do with a mob. Well, you're ignorant then, because it has everything to do with a mob. It's the mob that got sent down to the south. Is the south version of the mob. Just because the commission is centralized in New York or I forget I forget the name of the city. Empire City, I think, is what it's called in this. Just because the commission's there and they're New Yorkers, and that's the Italian New Yorker lifestyle is what you think of for mobsters. The mob was everywhere back in the day. I mean, everywhere. I mean, they were in the South. I mean, especially the South, honestly. A lot of the old money for the mob came from the South with bootlegging and prohibition. Everything kind of funneled up. There's plenty of people involved in the mob that helped during the prohibition to keep the mob going in terms of money. Yeah, I mean, do a little research sometime. Someone that's really interested and wants to learn more about the mob. The South had a lot to do with the mob and still did for a long time. And so this game does that correctly, where there is a huge mob organization in their version of New Orleans. And New Bordeaux does a really good job, I think, of having the hierarchy set up, and the Italian mob isn't. It's a Southern Italian mob, and it works really well. However, I'm gonna get into some nitty gritty things here in a second. I want to say that as you go through it, the big characters that you come across, the capos and everything like that. I mean, the head honchos of the game, they're really intriguing. Outside of that, there's really no one memorable. Which, granted, I mean, do you really think anyone will be memorable? But I would at least hope for like some type of interesting facts of like the guys that you go like that are leading you to the big story piece mission, right? Because here's the crux of the game. Mafia 3 is a Far Cry hybrid game of the Mafia franchise, where it takes the loose structure of Grand Theft Auto and mixes it in with the Far Cry mechanics, where you take over sections of the city in order to take down and go against the big bad guy, right? And along the way, you can upgrade yourself and get more guns, and you choose rackets, and then when you take over the rackets, you assign them certain people that give you certain kickbacks, and then you assign districts, which gives you even more kickback, but that district becomes locked to a specific person, whereas rackets, that's say Vito Scaletta, the main character from Mafia 2, he's in this. That's say you give him two of the rackets in a district, but you end up giving that district to Cassandra, who is a Haitian mobster. She owns the rackets then, and she owns that territory. And you push Vito out, and you basically kind of fuck him over. Well, same thing happened to Burke, who is a character who's an Irish former freedom fighter, I believe, if I remember right. But point is that the game becomes pretty much 80% of the time of go and do these mundane racket missions. I'm not doing them right now, but this actually would be essentially what it would be, where you go to these locations, you fight the racket in terms of the missions leading up to that racket, and then you take over by killing one of the higher ups who shows up because you've destroyed the business at that location, right? And that's pretty much rinse and repeat. And each one does different missions, quote unquote, but really it comes down to the same thing. You go in, you kill a bunch of motherfuckers, and you either interrogate a guy to find more information on how to destroy the network, you destroy a bunch of stuff at the locations, you steal their money, or you kill a specific person, like this guy. Once that's all done, then you do the next big thing. Once you do both of those, once you do all the racket, you control one racket, then you do another racket, and then pretty much that leads you to the big main mission for that section before you take over the district, right? And that's the story element. Now, this game, like all the other Mafias, great story. Great story, great characters in terms of the main characters that you see and that pop up, and it's got a really engrossing world. But again, the big thing, despite the fact that they've added collectibles, despite the fact that it's a very open world and that it has more stuff to do, it still feels empty, still feels boring. The mission structures leave a lot to be desired and are boring as fuck. The mechanics in terms of firefights are very rudimentary and just very by the books in terms of gunfights and all that. And it feels like, honestly, you could stealth the whole game and it feels really fucking easy, right? And that's disappointing. The driving feels okay. I've seen some people say the driving's terrible. I think it's fine. But I mean, my barometer is bad game driving for like open world games is fucking Watch Dogs. Watch Dogs had the worst driving mechanics I've ever seen, and that surprised me because it had a guy from Driver, the fucking driving series, do the fucking driving mechanics, and it was they were terrible. They were terrible. This game has fine. They feel like Grand Theft Auto 4 with like the kind of boaty, big driving feel to it, but that actually kind of makes sense because a lot of the cars back then were a lot longer, were a lot weightier, were a lot heavier, so they should turn a little sluggishly at times. But overall, I mean, I looked at this game and it had a lot of potential. I don't think I would be really negative like a lot of people though, because the story is fantastic, the music is great, characters are great. Yeah, it has a lot of blemishes, but overall it is a solid game. I would wait to buy it for now. There are plenty of other games to buy that would be way more worth your money, like Grand Theft Auto or Gears of War 4 or Tomb Raider. But it is something that keep your eye out if there's a sale. If it's like 30 or below, pick it up. It's got some good qualities to it. Anyway, that's the end of this episode. Hit the like and sub button if you would so kindly. Love you guys. See you guys next episode, and I'll catch you later. Peace.